morning. My name is Karen Porter. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Health Science and Public Policy here at Brooklyn Law School. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to Brooklyn Law School and my joy and privilege to be co-hosting this program with our friends and colleagues from the Hastings Center. In addition to my own greetings to you this morning, I've been asked by Interim Dean Mary Ellen Fullerton to extend a warm welcome to our collaborators, distinguished speakers, alumni, students, and colleagues from other institutions. The center was founded in 2002 with the goal of creating an interdisciplinary venue where new ideas, policies, and programs are generated. Each year, we host a variety of programs that we hope will help in advancing technology and clarifying the duties and obligations of our healthcare system. With the enthusiastic support of a broad constituency of scholars and professionals, we strive to offer programs that inform the public and encourage scholarship and research to improve the quality of healthcare services and the integrity of science. It has been our tradition to foster leadership, encouraging new initiatives, and partner with programs and people that are moving healthcare and science into the future. I think it was Dr. Melinda Hall, one of our speakers today, who described today's program as a bold conference. I wanted to echo her sentiments. It is bold to raise questions that challenge normative ideas. And although it shouldn't be, it is particularly bold to raise questions of equality, identity, and belonging, as many of our speakers will today. We invite you to listen, learn, question, and engage. In doing so, we ask that you help us to be inclusive of the variety of voices and perspectives in the room and to be respectful of all. I have a few announcements, and they're very short. There are 2 handicapped, accessible, and gender-neutral bathrooms located on this floor. For anyone in need of a gender-specific bathroom, such bathrooms are located on the first floor of the building. The program is being videotaped and live-streamed. At about 12:15, we'll be taking a break for lunch. We're asking that you retain your name tags so that you can re-enter the building. At the end of the day, we'll be collecting those name tags just to recycle them. For those of you who are attending the program both today and tomorrow, there will also be new name tags tomorrow. We just ask you to re-register in the morning. Finally, I would like to acknowledge the enormous efforts it takes to put together an event like this. The planning for this event began almost a year ago. I want to thank members of the Brooklyn Law School community and the Hastings Center who worked diligently to move this event from idea to the event that we have today. Please join me in thanking Elizabeth Alper, Anna Puello, Ruth Rosiana, Marnie Klein, Isabel Bolo, Vicki Payton, Nora Porter, and Elizabeth Dietz. I want to also thank our IT team who's here, Kirk Banton, Alan Volney, and Shantae Scott. Finally, I just want to acknowledge the support that the program has also received from our other sponsors, the Program and Narrative at Columbia and the Center for Bioethics at Harvard Medical School. Now I'd like to turn the program over to Dr. Erik Parens.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's so much fun to be working together again. We've been working together for a long time. Thank you, Karen, so much for giving us, hosting us in this beautiful space, for helping us create the program. Thanks to all the people that you thanked, the people who worked relentlessly to make this happen. Specifically, I wanted to add a few thanks to Millie Solomon, who is the president of the Hastings Center, who has given unending moral and economic support to this effort. And I want to add my thanks to Christine Mitchell, who again is the executive director of the Center for Bioethics at Harvard, for her moral and financial support. And the same goes to Rita Sharon at Columbia, the director of their narrative medicine program. So, I work at the Hastings Center, which many of you know is a bioethics research institute in Garrison, New York. There I am the director of a new bioethics and the humanities initiative. The Bioethics and Humanities Initiative has been created with incredibly generous support from the National Endowment for the Humanities and some private donors. The initiative aims to deepen the Hastings Center's core commitment to humanities-based scholarship in bioethics and to try to nurture future leaders in this area. In 2017, we, to our enormous good fortune, were able to hire Joel Reynolds as our inaugural Rice Family Postdoctoral Fellow in the initiative. And it is with Joel with whom I have been working for a long time to bring together this event, and he and I and Karen are going to share the responsibility to lead the conference, and he and I will be sharing the responsibility to create the collection of essays that we hope will be published in the Hastings Center report that's going to come out of the conference. So I'd like to say a few words about the title of the conference, the gift and weight of genetic knowledge. And to understand the title, it helps to understand a metaphor that has been a preoccupation of mine now for a while, a metaphor that I began to develop in the book that I am shamelessly advertising here. I'm referring to the metaphor of binocular vision. Most human beings, though obviously not all, have depth perception. Depth perception is made possible by the fact that our brains integrate two slightly different sets of information that are registered by our two eyes. And it's based on these two slightly different sets of information that we're able to perceive one scene in depth. And over time, working in bioethics, I've been struck by how useful it can be to try to remember to integrate at least two highly different sets of information about many of the topics that my colleagues and I seek to comprehend in depth. So take, for example, the need to comprehend persons in depth. As persons, or I should say are persons, objects whose experience can be explained by the sciences, or are persons subjects who have experience that demands understanding of the sort that we in the humanities pursue. With a binocular approach, we can see persons as objects whose experience can be explained by the sciences, and we can see persons as subjects whose experience calls out for understanding. And by the way, those arrows are supposed to emphasize that binocular vision of the conceptual variety, I think, is always going to be an aspiration, never an achievement. That is, due to the mischievous sense of humor of our creators, we can in fact only see through one conceptual lens at a time. We me mortals have to oscillate between lenses. Is technology a value-neutral tool that we can use for the ends that we freely choose, or is technology a value-laden frame that determines what we choose? on a binocular approach, we can acknowledge the value in oscillating between those two ways of seeing what technology is. And in a similar spirit, instead of getting comfortable with the idea that genomic knowledge is a gift or is a weight, we can affirm the usefulness of seeing it in both ways. So in what sense or way is genomic knowledge a gift? It's worth saying, as obvious as it is. Geneticists envision that genomic knowledge will lead to cures and ultimately will conduce to the health of all of us, as the National Institutes of Health now puts it. Even without curing anybody, genetic knowledge can sometimes put an end to what clinicians call diagnostic odysseys. Genetic knowledge can sometimes help prevent the onset of horrible diseases like breast cancer and ovarian cancer. And perhaps more unexpectedly, genomics is being used by, among others, African Americans in various sorts of what, in her masterful book, The Social Life of DNA, Alondra Nelson calls efforts at reconciliation. One thing that Professor Nelson, who will be speaking tomorrow, has in mind with that term reconciliation is that some African Americans are using genetic ancestry to make what they take to be meaningful connections to the geographical homes from which their ancestors were stolen. That's all gift. And as Professor Nelson also observes in her book, genomic knowledge, or at least genomic information, can also be used to reify race and to heap injustice upon injustice. Indeed, not only racists, but sexists and classists and all sorts of other ists can also use genomic information strategically in their attempts to justify the status quo. Genomic information, as everybody in this room knows, can disrupt the origin stories that some Native peoples take to be deeply meaningful for them. Genomic knowledge can be used by employers and insurers and the state to intensify their surveillance efforts. Genomic knowledge can be used by prospective parents to intensify the surveillance of embryos and fetuses. Moreover, pouring resources into the pursuit of genomic knowledge to improve the health of all of us means that there are fewer resources available to pour into non-genomic interventions that might be even more effective at improving the health of all of us. So I really, really am committed to seeing genomic knowledge as a weight and a gift. And I want to acknowledge up front that at this conference, you are going to be invited to spend more time looking through the weight lens than through the gift lens. And I can give you two reasons for that. First, this conference comes out of a bioethics and the humanities initiative. One of the things that I take the humanities to be for is stepping back and doing what most people just don't have time to do. That is, to reflect on what is widely assumed to be common sense. Many very smart people take it to be common sense that information is power and that more information is better, especially if it can somehow be related to our health. So it strikes me as perfectly reasonable that at this conference, sponsored by a Humanities Initiative, we give special attention to the ways in which more genomic information might not always be better. The second reason it makes sense at this conference, that again is part of a National Endowment for the Humanities initiative, the second reason it makes sense for us to emphasize the weight more than the gift is that for us in bioethics, the emphasis is usually the other way around. Like many others in bioethics, my livelihood depends in significant part on grant funding, and not infrequently that means funding from the National Institutes of Health, which of course has a tendency to look at genomic knowledge through the gift lens. Please make sure you understand me here. I do not mean that we who receive funding from NIH's Ethical, Legal, and Social Implications program never get to point out ways in which genomic knowledge can be a weight. If we can frame our concerns in terms of privacy or economic costs or psychological harms to individuals, NIH is all ears. But NIH does not, and there is no reason that it should give grant money to step back and reflect on what passes for common sense. So, yes, again, in this conference, I urge us all to aspire to a binocular comprehension of genomic knowledge. And I am very deeply grateful for this opportunity to look through the weight lens for longer than usual with all of you who have come here today and with the group of truly extraordinary scholars that has agreed to speak formally with us. To give you a more concrete sense of what you're in for, I would like to turn it over to my colleague and my friend and our inaugural Rice Family Postdoctoral Fellow, Joel Reynolds.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to second all of Erik's thank yous. I want to add just a couple more. I want to reiterate. Oh, I actually don't have slides. I want to reiterate the thank you to Vicki Payton, Isabel Bolo, Ben Wills, and Liz Alpert, who have provided invaluable support to make this happen. An extra special thanks goes out to Marnie Klein and Kirk Banton, who have tirelessly worked to make all of the AV and communications run smoothly and in an accessible manner. I also want to thank the former program directors, Rachel Zacharias and Liz Dietz, who were instrumental in the planning of this conference up until their departures to law and grad school this summer. Congrats to them. I would not be standing here, as Erik mentioned, if it were not for the generous support of the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Rice family, and other private donors who provided the support for the new Bioethics and the Humanities Initiative, and thereby provided support that brought me to the Hastings Center such that I'm standing here today. I also want to give a very special thank you to Erik Parens. It's been an absolute joy to work with you and to learn from you. We're everyone so lucky. I want to thank all of the Hastings Center staff and research scholars. If you didn't already know it, the team there is phenomenal. They're amazing people, they're fantastic researchers, and in my mind, they're living proof that bioethics has a unique and profound potential to assist with and even improve the theory and practice of medicine and the many institutions tied to it. I want to thank the speakers. Getting the chance to put together a dream team like this is a very rare occurrence, and I can't wait to see all that comes out of this conference. Thank you to all of the staff here at Brooklyn Law School, from the people who are serving the food and refreshments to the people who clean this beautiful room. Thank you so much for your time and your labor. One of the many goals of this conference is to prioritize accessibility as a principle for both the practice and the theory of academic engagement. In that spirit, I want to encourage everyone to use this space as needed, whether that means standing, sitting. If you can't hear someone at the front, if something is going on, if something's blocking your vision, please interrupt and let us know. It's more important that everyone can be engaged than things to keep going as they're planned. If you're tweeting, our Twitter handle is @Hastings Center. That's @HASTINGSCENTER. I also want to acknowledge here at the beginning of this conference that the land on which we gather is the traditional unceded and occupied territory of the Canarsie and Lenape peoples. And now, a couple words. And what follows should not really be heard as my own words, but as those of Erik and I, since they have arisen quite directly out of joint conversations over the last year. All infelicities and the bad ideas are my own entirely, naturally. At the core of every normative ethical theory, every theory that guides one to determine right from wrong, praiseworthy from blameworthy action, is a simple, profound assumption. Knowledge is not enough. Whether one sees the moral universe in terms of virtues, duties, consequences, or cares, knowledge alone will not unlock this universe's secrets. It will not and cannot do so because the meaning, not to mention application of knowledge, is shaped by far more than it alone. Depending upon the theory, one needs practical wisdom, understanding, judgment, sensitivity, and humility, or perhaps all of the above. In Book 2 of the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle declares, "Our present inquiry does not aim, as others do, for the purpose of our examination." Our present inquiry does not aim, as others do, at study, for the purpose of our examination is not to know what virtue is, but to become good. This claim perhaps strikes modern academics and practitioners as strange. How can an inquiry make someone good? What path leads from knowing to being? On the contrary, is not the chasm between theory and praxis as old as philosophical and reflective thought itself? However one answers those questions, both the advent and the history of bioethics suggests that without critical reflection, those who take themselves to be good and do good too often become exemplars of the opposite. History teaches over and over again that the practice of medicine and that of bioethics must involve heeding the testimony of others, both past and present, and also being acutely concerned for the well-being of future generations. Put very simply, one cannot become good or do good without a critical engagement with all manner of subjugated knowledges. But even this will not be enough. If one takes the time to read through the terms of service agreement for one of the leading direct-to-consumer genetic testing companies in the world, 23andMe, which I might have, maybe you have, I don't know, you will find a remarkable line just a few pages in. This knowledge is irrevocable. This arresting phrase attests to an increasing recognition of the gravity of genomic knowledge and the increasing role it plays in shaping human life, in shaping medicine, in shaping the entire field of bioethics. On the one hand, genomic knowledge is certainly a gift, as Erik invited us to think about, creating novel insights into the genetic drivers of disease and into the geographical paths of our ancestors. On the other, it is a weight, creating new obligations, new forms of social classification, and new forms of surveillance, including the old forms of each it also reinforces. Thus, we're led to confront a fundamental question: how can we live well in the face of knowledge that can change the very criteria, conditions, and lived experience of life itself, including the very meaning of being well? How should we apply this knowledge, and how should we think about the tensions its value harbors and the disparate ends towards which it can be placed? Or, as we summarize such questions for this conference, what does it mean to be a good biocitizen? And by extension, to live in a good biocity, and even to practice good biopolitics. I'm not sure if that should be in quotation marks or not. By biocitizen, we follow scholars such as Nicholas Rose, Carlos Novas, and Dorothy Roberts, among many others, who refer to the ways in which being a citizen today in many contemporary industrial societies has become decisively influenced by developments in biology in general and genomics in particular. Among the developments that mark the age of the biocitizen are calls for everyone to become proactive managers of their health and to contribute ever more data about it in order to improve their future health states and that of their respective populations, including the global population. Death and disease are no longer conditions that befall us. We can instead engage in the lifelong proactive mitigation of health risk factors, energetically promoting conditions for long life. The biocitizen today, in other words, is invited to commune, conspire, and conduct their life for health and in the name of health. Furthermore, the responsibilities of biocitizenship are fundamentally shared, whether with respect to vaccination, washing one's hands, or testing one's genes. The biocitizen is understood as one who acts for all of us, as the current incarnation of the NIH's Precision Medicine Initiative is today aptly named. This conference aims to take a step back and ask, in what ways might biocitizenship promote human flourishing, and in what ways might it, or might it already be, thwarting it? What are the conditions that constitute and shape the biocitizen today, and how ought one act in light of these? It goes without saying, as Erik touched upon, it is common sense that health is assumed to be an ultimate, if unassailable, value. And millions of federal and billions of private dollars are staked on the future of genomic answers to problems dogging health outcomes. Yet, bioethics as a discipline, as a field, arose as a response to biomedical researchers and practitioners placing gains in knowledge above the value of the lives from which and through which that knowledge was gained. That is to say, the field emerged out of a response to injustice and as a witness to the lived testimony of those who suffered exclusions and tortures and deaths in the name of medical progress and knowledge building. Heeding not only the lessons of this history, but also our contemporary, increasingly fraught socio-political context, we wish to gain clarity on how genomics has shaped and is shaping lived experience and its possibilities. How, against the background and impacts of such knowledge, might we in fact be good biocitizens and better leverage genomics toward a life lived well in health for all of us? Our first speaker today is Colin Copeman. Professor Copeman is Associate Professor of Philosophy at the University of Oregon. He's the author of numerous articles spanning ethics and political theory, and his multiple books have been received with critical acclaim. He has a forthcoming monograph with the University of Chicago Press, which is of special interest to all of us here. It's entitled How We Became Our Data, a genealogy of the informational person. It will be out in 2019.